And with that, we are thrilled to welcome in NFL insider Albert Breer to the show. How you doing today, Albert?
Hey, what's up, guys? How you doing?
Albert, we're doing good. Tyvus claims that no Ohio State player has ever shrunk in the big moment as the biggest Ohio State fan.
No, that's not what I said.
What you
when
said?
I played, that's what I said.
Okay.
My team,
Okay.
12 to 15.
Yeah.
We never shrunk in the moment.
They've all been at their best in the biggest moments, you're saying. So that's like Zeke, Bosa, Eli Apple,
Yes.
Marion Conley,
Yep.
Michael Thomas, Taylor Decker.
They were loaded back there too.
I mean, I can't think of like too many like that really puked all over themselves in a big moment. I don't know.
I gave it to him.
I was pretty upset on the night of the Michigan State game and
Hey, Albert. Stop bringing that up. It never happened. I think everybody keep bringing that. You go bring that up. We done with that.
Albert, this on an unrelated note, but Shedeur Sanders yesterday. So the coverage in Cleveland on a rookie minicamp is insane.
over the top. Yeah.
It's great. Zach Jackson, you know Zach, right, who covers the Browns. So Zach was on our show yesterday talking about Shedeur Sanders. He said, for what it's worth, with no pads and no defense, he thought, in terms of arm talent, he looked way better than Dillon Gabriel. He said it wasn't even close. That video had over 70,000 views on our show because Shedeur Sanders is magic for media. The coverage of him is crazy. Have you ever seen anything like this?
I mean, I've seen it in Cleveland before, right? Like, I mean, like Cleveland's the capital of this sort of thing. You had Johnny Manziel there, you had Baker there, Deshaun coming over in the trade. I feel like this is actually the sort of situation that Cleveland's been in the middle of a lot, over the last 15 years. Now, if you're asking me, have I ever seen this with a 5th round pick before? The answer is no, right? Because it's such a unique situation from that standpoint. But we've seen it with quarterbacks before, for sure, where there's a lot of hoopla over their arrival in a place. And, I think this is part of what you sign up for when you take him. And it's part of the reason, quite honestly, why he fell. I would say this, and I know I've said this a lot of different places. I'm sure you guys have heard me, but I think Shedeur fell out of the 1st and 2nd round because of talent and performance. I think the fall beyond that was because of everything else. And the reality is that most teams want their backup quarterbacks to blend in with the furniture. For better or worse, that's what it is. He's the 40th guy in your roster, the 45th guy in your roster, whatever it is, and you don't want that guy creating any sort of disruption to the rest of the team. He's going to be a resource to the starter. He's going to give you depth, and that's going to be that. And I think for that reason, it's the same sort of dynamic that existed like Cam Newton, Jay Cutler, why they didn't have an extension of their careers in the back end. Tim Tebow, Colin Kaepernick, same thing. Most coaches, when you're talking about a 2nd or a 3rd string quarterback, will look at the guy who's got a high profile and then say, no, give me the anonymous guy over there.
To your point, I actually, Albert, will give Kevin Stefanski and Andrew Berry a little bit of credit. Actually, I give them a lot of credit because it would have just been easier to just take Dillon Gabriel and say, all right, we got Dillon Gabriel, we got 3 quarterbacks, we got 2 veterans, let's keep it moving. But they actually took a chance on Shedeur, and then they didn't even pour cold water on it. They said, and we're going to give him an opportunity to compete. I'll give them credit. The easiest thing in the world for 2 guys that won 3 games for the Cleveland Browns and with 2 first-round draft picks to go get somebody next year, gave him an opportunity, and it just shows me that they have a little bit of job security maybe, or they may think they can develop him in a way and get something out of for a value.
Well, I think we're also a product of our own experiences too. And I think the last couple of years, maybe, and I haven't talked to either of them about this specifically, but I'm just kind of thinking out loud here on this one. 2 years ago, they had Joe Flacco come in and he played really well and they win, 11 games, I think, and they make the playoffs. Even with everything else that had gone out on there and Deshaun out of the equation and everything else. And I think being in that situation 2 years ago, they looked at it and they said, okay, like in 24, we got to come back and we got to be solidly behind Deshaun. And so that's why Joe Flacco wasn't there last year, is because they felt like that would be introducing some level of chaos into the quarterback room, and they wanted to show that we're going to be like this team is Deshaun's team. And so they bring in Jameis Winston instead, who didn't have the history in that specific locker room that Flacco had. And like, quite honestly, it didn't work, so I think now you look at it, and maybe if you kind of like look at those 2 years as a mosaic, you say, let's just go back to giving ourselves every option we can possibly give ourselves and see what happens. And I think that may be the lesson of the last 2 years. And whether or not it works, we'll see. But they're throwing a lot of darts at the dartboard. And, again, this is sort of the opposite of what they did last year, where last year was like, let's see how much we can get out of Deshaun Watson. This is more, let's see how much we can get out of the quarterback position by trying multiple guys there.
Albert, let me zoom you out from the quarterback position and let me take you to the linebacker. Obviously, they drafted Carson Schlesinger with the second-round pick. JOK's news came out yesterday that he won't be playing this season. What did you see from him in the rookie mini camp that gives you hope that maybe he could be a good fit to replace JOK this season?
Well, I wasn't there, so I didn't see anything, but I can tell you what I've heard. Okay. I would just, look, this is something the Browns have had their eyes wide open on this, and the head and neck injuries. Obviously, I think we all can agree wish JOK the best. If that doesn't include football, that's fine. You know what I mean? Like whatever it is, hopefully he comes out of this healthy and can live a good long life either way, because I know how serious those things are. But the Browns have had their eyes wide open on this, and they signed Jerome Baker in the offseason, and then they were actually sniffing around on trading for veteran linebackers in the week leading up to the draft. Pete Warner from the Saints was one they made a call on. Obviously, there was a coaching change down there, and that's the sort of thing where you at least make the call and see. And then they wind up with Carson Schlesinger, who every year there will be like a handful of things that I'll remember that, after making a zillion phone calls, all 32 teams, all of that just kind of stick out. And Schlesinger actually was one of the guys that elicited one of them. And an executive for a team, not the Browns, said to me a day or two before the draft, he said, I'm not sure if he's going to go in the first round. But that guy made so many plays that it was difficult to evaluate the other defensive players at UCLA. Like, he was so all over the tape that it was hard for me to get a good read on the other guys on that tape because of him. And so I think that's what you're going to see, is like a guy whose instincts are off the charts, who's a good athlete, who had to earn it as a walk-on, and can make a good impact, And so you've got a backstop with a veteran in Jerome Baker, but you got an exciting young prospect, and maybe you still look at some more veteran options. But they've been pretty prepared for, the news they wound up getting on Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah.
Albert, with the retirement of Derek Carr, I know the assumption has been that Aaron Rodgers would go to Pittsburgh. Is there a chance that New Orleans is interested, and would he be interested in them?
Yeah, it would just be hard for me to see how you do that financially with everything they're dealing with, and the contract situation being what it is. I think Aaron would have to go there for a lot less. I'm not sure what will pull him there. And then, to me, guys, I look at where the Saints are right now, and this is a very natural point where they can separate, right? Like, this is a very natural point where they can say, this is a time for us to, and a time that sort of arose organically for us to hit the reset button and get younger. And maybe this is the last year for Demario Davis. Maybe this is the last year for Tyrann Mathieu. We're going to have to make a decision on guys who are younger players who we like coming into contract situations like Chris Olave. They've got a good base of talent on their offensive line, but elsewhere they need a lot of help, and I think this is, to me at least, shining, flashing red lights. It's time to reset with a new coaching staff and start again. And, I don't know that necessarily it will be for Aaron, it will be the chance to play inside. It'd be a chance to play with a coach who's done a great job with quarterbacks over the years in Kellen Moore. And you do have some talent there, a good offensive line. You'd be throwing to Chris Olave and Rashid Shaheed and some of the guys that are there. But I just don't know that the timelines match up the way that they do, or that they would, as far as where you are in your building process as they do with the Steelers and Rodgers himself.
You just mentioned something, and I'm going to drag you back into the quarterback realm. You said timelines, and timelines are very important in terms of, all right, what is our plan here? A lot of people in the city that are local who cover the team believe Kenny Pickett has the odds-on favorite, best chance and opportunity to start Week 1, and I don't know. I don't think necessarily that's the case. I would say Joe Flacco at this point. Yeah. But if you're looking at those two guys, and then you got the younger guys, the young pups who coming along, what is the game plan? Is this year about seeing how many games you can win with the veterans, or is the referendum seeming to be can we see if we got a quarterback in one of these young guys? What's the timeline for this, given the horizon of next year? And the urgency of getting a quarterback if you do have 2 first-round picks?
Well, I think, it's interesting because I think you either collapse under the weight of this, and now you're looking for a quarterback, or you have some sort of viable answer on your roster that can at least be a bridge for now, right? And so, I think the plan is to let them go out and compete in the spring and May and June, and there's only so many reps to go around when you get to July and August, and you've got to get a team ready to play in Week 1. So you would hope that, in the limited action that they get in the spring, you're at least going to have an idea of what the pecking order is and who is actually in the competition and capable of starting Week 1 for you. The fascinating thing to me is the investment that they've made in these guys. The guarantees in Joe Flacco's contract and Kenny Pickett's contract are virtually identical. So that means the penalty for walking away from either of those guys is the same. So do I think there's a chance that one of those guys, gets cut and the other one wins the job? I certainly think there's a possibility of that. But then that would necessitate one of the rookies being ready to be your backup. And there's a lot that goes into that as well. So you have to determine whether or not those guys are ready to be the backup. That, of course, is ruling out that one of those guys, Gabriel or Sanders, catches fire and wins the job outright. And so, let's say then that, you figure neither of those guys are ready to be the backup. So then do you keep 4? Do you cut one of the 2 rookies? And this is without even accounting for the fact that Deshaun Watson, what if he's cleared in November or something? So I just think there's a lot to sort out. And because of the timelines, a lot of coaches will tell you they try to use the spring to teach and to educate players and to install their system and everything else. And then you don't really compete until you get to the summer. But I do think, given the numbers here, that you have to, if you're a Kevin Stefanski, Tommy Rees, and the offensive staff, at least come out of the spring with an idea of what the competition is going to look like when you get to camp.
Albert, if I remember correctly, I think the Browns finished dead last in offense last year, if I'm correct. When you look at this offseason that they've had, obviously the Deshaun contract holds a big part of why they can't do a lot of things, but they got some guys in the draft, maybe signed some guys here and there. And they're going back to Kevin's offense. With that being said, do you think they have enough to even be able to evaluate these quarterbacks correctly? Because is the talent there, I should say, around the quarterbacks?
Yeah, what's crazy, Tyvis? I think the left tackle position might be as important as quarterback. And I know that sounds crazy because no one's going to be talking about that the same way they're talking about the quarterback. But that's a position where if you strike out on a high first-round pick, you sometimes wind up chasing it for years. And so, the Jedrick Wills thing going the way that it did, and that went wrong for a number of different reasons. Injuries, one of them. You know what I mean? I think the football makeup of the players, another one. But regardless, now, what can DeJuan Jones be at left tackle? And that's a huge, huge, huge swing factor in what the Browns offense looks like this year, because I think we've seen dozens of examples of it over the years of offensive lines that have fallen apart under the weight of having an issue at left tackle. So that's a huge one to me. I think they've got enough. I think they're getting to a point at receiver where they've got enough, right? I think Jerry Reed has a chance to be a number one if he can be focused and be like where he needs to be on a consistent basis. Like I think he's got a chance. And then you got Njoku, you got him at a tight end. And then I love what they did with the running backs in the draft and bringing in both Judkins and Sampson. So, like, I think so much of this really boils down to what happens at left tackle. Because if DeJuan Jones can wind up being like a top half of the league left tackle, well, then you're pretty good on the offensive line. And I think a lot of other things will fall into place.
Albert, let's wrap it up with a question about two different players here that I'm curious to see what you think is going to happen. Nick Chubb, obviously, it's going to be painful for all of us to see him in another uniform, but if his career is going to continue, that's what's going to happen. So where do you think he's going to end up? And how does the Trey Hendrickson situation in Cincinnati resolve itself?
And you're still a Bengals fan, huh? Well,
Always.
That's a
Always.
question. That's a question. Yeah. The Chubb, with Chubb, I hear other people talking about. I love Nick Chubb. Like I think he is. I think it goes without saying. Like his place in Browns history is cemented. He's just a guy who set such a tremendous tone for so many people there, and was such an excellent player. Fought through so much. He had like so many injury problems before even getting to the pros. Like almost Frank Gore in that way. So. With all due respect to all of that, he averaged 3.3 yards per carry last year. And I think we can all admit that he wasn't the same. And that's the main reason why the Browns have, put themselves in a position where they turn over that spot. So, like, where's he going to end up? I think he could be one of these guys where you look up at the end of July and he's waiting for something to open up somewhere. Yeah. And maybe it happens in the spring where somebody gets into their OTAs and decides we don't really like what we have at running back, and so we need to add something. Maybe that's somebody like Dallas, like that could relate to how Jaden Blue does, the rookie they drafted out of Texas. Like, what does that look like? And if that doesn't look quite the way you're hoping, do you go and get Nick Chubb to help shore up that position or help mentor your rookie? Is there another situation where you feel like you need an every down guy, or like more of a traditional every down guy who can get out of the tough yards, and that sort of situation could exist as well. As for Trey Hendrickson, this has become a really unpredictable situation. I mean, one day he's putting a statement out, the next day he's walking to practice with his teammates, there's a lot of history there too. Like this has been an issue for the last couple of years. This is not new. And, as you guys know, like when a player has to wait an extra year or two, that's not going to move him off his stance. That's not going to make him more likely to take the hometown discount. So I think the Bengals will be motivated to get something done, in part because they want to keep their quarterback happy, but I think it remains a pretty unpredictable situation.
Albert, great insight as always. We appreciate the time, man.
Appreciate you.
Thank you, Albert.
Awesome. Thanks for having me, guys.